Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Tuesday, May 13th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside will reach a high of 68.5 degrees today, with the low dipping to 55.8, making for a cool and pleasant day, so perhaps a light jacket would be comfortable if you're heading out. Coming up on the program, we'll dive into the details of a sweeping new Republican tax bill, helping you understand its potential implications. Then, we'll explore why Governor Newsom's new rules addressing homelessness are presenting considerable challenges for cities across California, and what this means for local communities. We'll bring you the full picture on these important developments. All this and more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. We're starting this morning with big news from Capitol Hill, where House Republicans have unveiled a massive new tax legislative package. For more on this, we turn to our news reporter, Ethan. Ethan, this bill has a rather grand title, doesn't it?
It certainly does, Grace. According to reporting from KGNS.TV, Yahoo Finance, and the Star Tribune, all referencing Associated Press material, the proposal is reportedly titled The One Big Beautiful Bill. Its primary aim, as detailed by Perplexity API, is to make permanent many of the tax cuts enacted during former President Trump's 2017 tax reforms.
So it's largely about extending existing cuts. But are there new tax breaks being proposed as well? It sounds like they're trying to sweeten the pot.
Absolutely. Beyond just extending those cuts, the legislation introduces a whole host of new tax benefits. KGNS.TV, Yahoo Finance, and the Star Tribune report. These include new tax breaks on tips, which will be a welcome sound to many service workers, and also on overtime pay. There are also proposed breaks for Social Security benefits for seniors who meet certain income thresholds. And an interesting one, Grace, a temporary deduction of up to $10,000 on interest, paid on auto loans, but specifically for vehicles assembled in the U.S., as noted by Yahoo Finance.
A Made in America tax break, interesting indeed. What about things like the standard deduction or the child tax credit? Are we seeing changes there?
We are. Yahoo Finance reports the standard deduction would get a $2,000 boost, reaching $32,000 per household. The child tax credit is also slated to increase from $2,000 to $2,500 per child for 4 years, according to both Yahoo Finance and KGNS.TV. However, this expansion comes with a significant new restriction aimed at preventing undocumented immigrants from claiming the credit, even if their children are U.S. citizens. Perplexity API also highlights this particular change.
That restriction is bound to spark considerable debate. What other major provisions are included in this sweeping bill, Ethan?
Well, for Republicans in high-tax states, there's a placeholder to potentially triple the state and local tax, or SALT, deduction cap to $30,000 for couples, as reported by KGNS.TV, Yahoo Finance, the Star Tribune, and Perplexity API. The estate tax exemption would also be increased significantly to $15 million and indexed for future inflation, according to Yahoo Finance. Additionally, the bill proposes a new tax of up to 21% on the endowments of large private universities and would terminate tax-exempt status for groups that the State Department deems supportive of what they term terrorists.
Those are some far-reaching proposals. Now let's talk about the bottom line. A bill this ambitious must come with a hefty price tag. What are the cost estimates?
They are substantial, Grace. The Joint Committee on Taxation, as cited by Yahoo Finance, the Star Tribune, and Perplexity API, estimates that just extending Trump's first-term tax cuts alone would reduce federal revenue by $4.9 trillion over a decade. But, as Perplexity API clarifies, that figure does not even include the cost of all these newly proposed tax breaks we've been discussing.
So $4.9 trillion is just the starting point? What could the total cost balloon to?
Representative Chip Roy, a Republican from Texas, has warned that the total price tag, once these new provisions are factored in, could climb as high as $20 trillion. This is according to reports from KGNS.TV, Yahoo Finance, and the Star Tribune. Such a figure would significantly increase deficits and the national debt.
$20 trillion. That's a number that's hard to even comprehend. How do proponents plan to offset these costs, or at least part of them?
The bill proposes significant reductions in federal spending to partially offset these costs. KGNS.TV, Yahoo Finance, The Star Tribune, and Perplexity API all report that these cuts target Medicaid, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, which many know as food stamps, and various green energy programs. For instance, Yahoo Finance details that the proposed Medicaid cuts would come through new eligibility and work requirements.
And I understand there's another major component to this bill, something concerning the debt ceiling. That's always a contentious issue.
That's right. Perplexity API notes a politically charged inclusion, a $4 trillion increase in the debt ceiling. Former President Trump has reportedly prioritized this to avoid needing a major spending deal with Democrats later on to prevent a potential default. Perplexity API's analysis suggests that proactively bundling such a substantial debt ceiling increase with a partisan tax cut package of this magnitude is quite rare in the past 50 years.
Bundling those two is certainly a bold move. What's the timeline for this bill, and what kind of headwinds is it facing? It can't be smooth sailing for something this big.
House Republicans under Speaker Mike Johnson are aiming to pass the bill through the House by the Memorial Day deadline, which, as of today, May 13th, is just 13 days away. The broader goal, according to Perplexity API, is for the legislation to reach President Trump's desk by early July. However, it faces opposition, even from within the Republican Party. Senator Josh Hawley, for example, has voiced criticism of cutting Medicaid to fund tax breaks, as reported by KGNS.TV, Yahoo Finance, and The Star Tribune.
It sounds like this legislative battle is just beginning, and those 13 days will be critical. Thank you, Ethan, for breaking down this complex and frankly quite colossal proposal for us.
You're welcome, Grace. And as you said, we'll be watching this closely, with continued reporting and analysis from sources like KGNS.TV, Yahoo Finance, The Star Tribune, The Associated Press, and Perplexity API.
We're turning now to a significant development here in California regarding how our cities manage homeless encampments. Governor Gavin Newsom is proposing a major shift, and here to break it all down for us is our news reporter, Chloe. Chloe, what's the core of the governor's new plan?
Grace, Governor Newsom is strongly urging all local governments across the state to adopt ordinances that restrict public camping. The headline-grabbing part of this, announced just yesterday, is a suggestion for a rule that would require unhoused individuals to move their camps every 3 days. LAist reports that Newsom has even put forward a model ordinance for cities to consider.
A model ordinance? So, like a template for cities to use? What does this template suggest beyond just moving every 3 days?
Exactly, it's a framework. According to LAist, this model ordinance includes provisions to ban camping in one specific location for more than 3 consecutive nights. It also aims to prohibit the construction of what they call semi-permanent structures, and, importantly, prevent the blocking of public streets or sidewalks. It sounds like the governor is trying to get things moving. Quite literally.
That's a significant ask. Is there any financial support being offered to cities to implement these changes? It sounds like it could be costly.
There is. The governor has backed this initiative with a promise of $3.3 billion. This funding is derived from Proposition 1, which, as viewers might recall, was recently passed by voters to address street homelessness and mental health issues. So the money is intended to help with the transition and provide resources.
$3.3 billion is a substantial sum, but are there any conditions or, perhaps, words of caution from the governor attached to this push for stricter rules?
Yes, and this is a key point. Governor Newsom has cautioned cities against implementing blanket bans on camping if there are no available shelter beds. He's emphasizing that the priority should be on providing shelter and services. According to LAist, this includes requirements for cities to store any confiscated belongings and to provide 48-hour warnings before conducting any encampment sweeps. So it's not just about clearing areas, there are protocols.
This sounds like a big step. Is this a brand new direction, or does it build on previous efforts or rulings, Chloe?
It definitely builds on existing groundwork. As detailed by LAist and Perplexity API, this strategy follows a recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling that affirmed cities' authority to ban public camping, provided there are alternative shelter options available. It also expands on Governor Newsom's previous directive for state agencies to clear encampments located on state property. In fact, Perplexity API notes that between July 2021 and May of this year, over 16,000 encampments were cleared using a method Newsom's office describes as, quote, proven and workable, end quote, which now informs this new model ordinance.
16,000 encampments, that's a staggering number. With such a direct proposal, what's the reaction been? Is everyone, for lack of a better term, a happy camper with this plan?
Not entirely, Grace. There are significant concerns. LAist has pointed out that such frequent displacement can be detrimental to the health of unhoused individuals and can seriously hinder their progress toward finding stability. A major challenge, as you might expect, is that many cities simply lack a sufficient number of shelter beds. And even when beds are available, the shelters themselves can sometimes present issues, like concerns about violence or poor living conditions. Critics, as mentioned by Perplexity API, argue that these measures risk criminalizing homelessness rather than addressing its root causes.
That's a critical point. How are some of our major cities, like San Jose, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, responding to this proposed 3-day move rule and the model ordinance?
They're definitely grappling with it. In San Jose, for instance, Bay City News reported that the city council has expressed concern about their mayor's plan to arrest unhoused people who refuse shelter. Perplexity API elaborates that San Jose officials are debating the ethical and practical implications, especially if shelter options are limited or unsuitable. They're emphasizing prioritizing shelter and services over strict enforcement for now.
And what about Los Angeles? They have a very visible unhoused population.
Los Angeles has a history of challenging statewide encampment bans that lack adequate funding for housing solutions. As Perplexity API notes, city officials there are likely to demand sustained, multi-year funding. They're expected to consider adapting Newsom's model ordinance but with local modifications, reflecting their own housing shortages. LA has been working to expand shelter capacity and emphasizes comprehensive services, including mental health support and job training.
And San Francisco? They often have unique approaches.
San Francisco officials have traditionally tried to balance enforcement with outreach and what are known as housing-first strategies, which prioritize getting people into stable housing quickly. Perplexity API suggests the city's leaders will likely weigh the adoption of Newsom's model ordinance with local tailoring. This could mean adjusting that move every 3 days rule to align with existing programs and ensuring dignity during clearances. They've also been under pressure to increase shelter availability, even exploring options like modular homes.
It sounds like the cities are trying to find a delicate balance. Is there a general sentiment from local governments about this state-level push?
Yes, Perplexity API indicates that many city officials and organizations like the League of California Cities are pushing back against the idea that local governments are primarily responsible for solving homelessness. They're calling for sustained funding for permanent housing solutions and comprehensive services, arguing that one-time funding and ordinances alone aren't enough to tackle such a complex issue. It seems they feel the state is trying to pass the buck, or perhaps pass the sleeping bag.
A complex situation with no easy answers. Chloe, thank you for shedding light on this developing story and helping us understand the nuances.
You're welcome, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. In Washington, the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is moving to fire Administrative Judge Karen Ortiz. This follows a mass email Ortiz sent in February, criticizing the agency's compliance with directives from former President Donald Trump, and questioning the fitness of acting chair Andrea Lucas. The email, copied to over 1,000 colleagues, was leaked on Reddit, gaining significant support. On May 8th, Ortiz was placed on administrative leave, with the EEOC citing profoundly unprofessional conduct and potential significant reputational harm as reasons for the proposed termination. Ortiz, who has 15 days to respond, maintains she will not compromise her ethics. U.S. budget carrier Avelo Airlines began operating deportation flights for U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement in May 2025. The airline signed a long-term charter agreement with the Department of Homeland Security to conduct these flights out of Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport using 3 Boeing 737-800 aircraft. Avelo CEO Andrew Levy acknowledged the decision is controversial, but stated it supports the Compania S expansion and helps protect jobs. This move is considered unusual, as such flights are typically handled by lesser-known charter companies, not scheduled commercial carriers. The announcement has sparked public backlash, including petitions calling for Avelo to halt these operations. Former President Donald Trump is facing scrutiny over a plan to accept a luxury-configured Boeing aircraft valued at nearly $400 million from the government of Qatar. Critics raise ethical concerns about accepting such a costly gift from a foreign government, viewing it as potential undue influence. Security and retrofitting concerns also abound, as the aircraft would require extensive and costly modifications, potentially costing taxpayers hundreds of millions to meet Air Force One standards. While some Republican senators have expressed unease, Trump has defended the offer as a quote, great gesture. The U.S. currently operates 2 aging Air Force One planes, with replacements facing delays. Turning to international news, Russia reportedly launched its smallest nighttime attack on Ukraine in months, a move that may be linked to potential peace talks. The conflict, which escalated dramatically in February 2022, has seen significant recent military operations from both sides, including Ukrainian ground attacks in the Kursk Oblast and substantial Russian losses. The reduced intensity of Russian attacks could be a strategic shift towards diplomacy, possibly influenced by international pressure or internal factors, as the conflict has severely impacted Ukraine's infrastructure. And there's a significant development in the Middle East. Eden Alexander, an American-Israeli dual national, was released on May 12, 2025, after being held hostage by Hamas in Gaza for more than 19 months. Alexander, reportedly the last living American citizen held by the group, was freed following direct negotiations between Hamas and the United States, coinciding with a temporary pause in combat operations. He was transferred via the Red Cross to the Israeli Defense Forces and reunited with his family. U.S. President Donald Trump celebrated the release, which occurred as he was departing for a diplomatic trip to the region. Hamas described the release as a, quote, goodwill gesture aimed at facilitating a lasting ceasefire. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 3.7, Gemini Pro 2.5 Experimental, Gemini Flash 2.0, Perplexity Sonar Pro, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.